Hey there, folks. A happy Friday to you. Thanks for joining us on this live stream. And if you're not seeing things, that is the camera being shaken by the wind as we take a look here at Spaghetti Junction. At least clear skies, still cold. We'll take it being above freezing at 36 degrees. And if you're a driver and you got to make your way through this particular artery to move around the metro, you rather see that as clear as possible and not backed up or anything like what we see around rush hour. So glad to see that as we're about to start our weekend. Lots to discuss, by the way, for the football fans out there for watching the Super Bowl. Certainly you're getting excited for that. Can't say I don't understand, because I certainly understand that'll be an exciting time to sit down and enjoy your Sunday. In the meantime, as we wrap up our Friday, I'm Jose Sosaya in the Wave Now studio, and we're going to break down some of the top stories our team's been working on over the course of the day. You likely were tuning in and you saw that there was so much to kind of see the spectacle out in Italy around Milan-Cortina for the Winter Olympics, which we're going to be, popping in and out of over the course of, the remainder of the games. And so this will be another avenue to break down some of the stories, the reporting that we're working on, let you know about the stories and the updates and the breaking news that are going on right here, right now in our community. We're going to begin tonight, though, across the river for you folks in Southern Indiana, maybe following on day 3 of this first and so far only trial in the Harvest Homecoming shooting that's gone before a jury. It's going before a jury, where one victim who was killed, a court team, 2 people were also hurt in this. Isaiah Page, the defendant on trial, prosecutors argue that he fired the shots that killed Bryce Gerlach. These are images from our Alina Noakes earlier today and our crews who were at the Floyd County Courthouse. So we're going to break down some of the quick testimony for you tonight, because a reminder, we don't have cameras inside. We're just able to relay the information that is reportable because it's said in the court proceeding. But okay. We'll begin with today's testimony. The last 2 days really working through what the prosecutors are calling the investigative facts in the case. To do that, most of the testimony has to come from a detective. In this case, it's Detective Phil Kaiser. With his testimony, though, there's been some disputing over what people involved told him that ended up connecting Isaiah Page to the shooting at the festival. Now, despite several arrests and searches in the days after people were hurt and Bryce Gerlach was killed, we don't hear Page's name enter the investigation until there's an interview with the different suspect's grandmother. Now, after that, Alina, in her reporting, saying prosecutors point to some statements made by people Page was with that night of the shooting, and then the actions they took to tie the defendant to the shooting, for example, texting about the festival after and then deleting those texts, and even testimony that Page was told to lay low by a different suspects. And while prosecutors, again, laying out their arguments as facts, the defense pointed to what was not found during the investigation. And so the defense in Page's case are highlighting that the gun page of the reporting of the documentation, that the gun page allegedly used in the shooting was never recovered, that there's no DNA or fingerprints tested on any of the 8 shell casings that were then found by police, and that there's no definitive bullet ID'd as the one that did kill Bryce Gerlach. So many more questions that either side will want to have answer or make their case for the jury to see what the information shows. As we'll head into the weekend, look forward to Monday when these, the court will reopen and the trial will reconvene. We'll have a crew there to get you the latest information. Send that to the website, to the app. This is a case that you are following. We will too, and let you know what has come of that. Coming back across the river to the Kentucky side, we know LMPD's now made a 3rd arrest. This was in a deadly shooting near PRP. If you remember, this was around Fort Haven Road, December 20th, and the victim, 20-year-old Milton Ritchie, found lying near a car in a ditch. He had been shot several times, and he died before he could get to the hospital. So now we know, leading up to this latest arrest, that there was a 15-year-old girl and a 20-year-old named Deontis Hodges, that they were both arrested and charged with murder. But today, police confirming a 17-year-old boy, so an older teen, but still 17-year-old, has also now been charged with murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. Police say Ritchie was actually lured to the area to meet the girl, but was met by Hodges and other, quote, involved parties, as police are describing them, before Ritchie was shot. Now, LMPD, for reasons that are understandable, not releasing the name of this suspect, 17-year-old, because they are underage, and so that won't be disclosed for public consumption. Heading over to other parts of the metro, we know the frustration still exists to try and clear some of the icier streets and blocks in Louisville. We're still dealing with what's left of January's winter storm. In this case, an update for JCPS students, and we know they're back in the classroom. Some buses, however, are still having some trouble navigating the side roads that they need to take. We learned today, for example, bus 1107 got stuck in the morning on Briargate Street. So this is for folks in PRP. You probably heard about what happened here. Our cameras were there as a tow truck, though, finally got the bus out of the snow on its way. Neighbors telling Wave News the bus was stuck for at least an hour. And JCPS saying that one student who was on board at the time was eventually picked up and taken to school. At least that was in our attempt to reach out for this confirmation with JCPS to see what had come, if anyone else was hurt. And you again, hear the update there saying that there was a student on board at the time, but they were picked up and then ultimately taken to school safe and sound. Perhaps also going around town as we're heading into the weekend, we had been hearing and getting reports and messages sent into the newsroom for some schools within the district and within Jefferson County. There were some student groups at several JCPS high schools who decided to walk out of the classroom to protest ongoing immigration operations across the U.S. And so we'll play some of the video that our crews were able to get of certain spots of the different crowds that had popped up. And so they are, as a group there were students chanting outside Central High School. There was a speech delivered by some of the students, some of them making signs, saying why they do not support current immigration, customs, and enforcement operations. We did talk to some of the protesting students about what doing this walkout meant to them.
I hope they know that they are empowered to do this as long as they can, as long as there is injustice. The kids have a right to speak out about it and call this for what it is.
It doesn't surprise me because Central High School is a very loving community. We have a very strong bond with each other, and we accept everyone for who they are.
Worth noting, there were students at other schools across the country. So over Friday, that seemed there was a similar walkouts in protest of the current immigration enforcement. So these are just one example of that locally here for us, but then reflected in some other reporting and stories across the U.S. In the vein of, what is discussed among political stories also for Kentucky, yes, the primaries are now a little over 3 months away. There's going to be a lot of attention, though, on this. This has to do with the Senate seat that will be eventually, vacated, is to say Senator Mitch McConnell will step down, will not run for re-election, and so someone can step in that is new. Within his party, the Republican Party, many candidates have adopted a strategy to win, claiming to be the most and then supported by President Donald Trump. Congressman Andy Barr, for example, bringing his Senate campaign to Louisville today, working to convince voters that he is the most reliable supporter of the Trump administration. Apparently, he has now decided to turn against a longtime congressional colleague. Wave News reporter David Mattingly looks as how the strategy is taking this turn in the race for U.S. Senate.
In the Kentucky U.S. Senate race, dominated by ads fighting over who is the most MAGA, a surprising figure has emerged who isn't in that race at all. President Trump spoke about him by name in the National Prayer Breakfast.
This guy named Thomas Massie, there's something wrong with him. We call him Rand Paul Jr. It's like they just vote no. They love voting no.
Then, a day later, Senate candidate Andy Barr defends his endorsement of Republican Ed Galrine for Congress.
The mission fails when ego comes before duty. In Congress, Thomas Massie does just that.
Galrine, seen in this ad, is running to unseat Massie, the 13-year incumbent, with Barr's backing.
He will be a team player who will focus on voting with Republicans to advance President Trump's agenda as opposed to opposing President Trump's agenda and voting with Democrats.
Massie's popularity as a Republican leader for balanced budgets and releasing the Epstein files paints him with a bullseye by the president and GOP candidates trying to leverage the president's supporters. On Monday, Trump called Massie's wife a radical left flamethrower and said Massie himself was a complete and total disaster. Massie responded on social media saying he votes GOP 91% of the time. because 9% of the time they are bankrupting our country, starting another war, or covering up for pedophiles. So, in a tight race for the party's nomination, the Trump-Massey feud has Senate candidate Barr now seeing one of his congressional colleagues as fair game.
By going against Massey, who has been fighting with Trump, the Senate candidates are at least able to try to burnish their claim to being the most pro-Trump, most MAGA of the people trying to win the U.S. Senate seat from Kentucky.
Our David Mattingly reporting there. Now, David did also reach out to Senator Rand Paul's office since he was mentioned by name, what he thought of the president's critical comments. David, at the time the report aired, had not received a reply. So much more to get into tonight as we're hitting that 8:15 mark where we'll usually reset to go into some more stories. We're going to work in, guys, is after we take this commercial break, is conversation of a lot of sports, a very sports heavy weekend. You've got the Super Bowl, which of course you're going to watch Sunday on NBC and on Wave, but also our Special Olympics coverage and inviting you in a series we've been working on that basically celebrates our local athletic talent, love for the winter sports that we can see being played and practiced and shared right here in Wave Country. So we're going to share a little preview of that for you coming up here on Wave News Extra. We'll be right back. At 8:18, appreciate you joining us here on the Wave News Extra live stream, live from the Wave Now studio, whether you're doing so from your downloadable apps on your Apple, Fire, Roku TVs, also joining us on wave3.com. Love for you all to continue to check that out as we're live streaming. You can, check in on that and follow all the updated breaking news, original reporting that we upload there, in real time. And then checking in with the folks who were able to comment on the live stream, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X. It's building for that interactive thing, and we can discuss this perhaps a little more interactive in this block when we're discussing sports. For those who love all kinds of levels of football, it's pro or college, which is where we're going to start. Understanding many of you will be watching Wave this Sunday as the Patriots and the Seahawks duke it out for Super Bowl 60, a very important, nice round number. And leading up to that, if you're someone who appreciates the history of the game, Wave News reporter Logan Perrone shares the story behind a Louisville man, from here in our hometown, who's told many stories of his own through Super Bowl history. Interesting, if maybe you've seen some NFL films, documentaries, unless you were at those games on the sidelines, maybe you wouldn't know what Ted Manahan looks like when he's got his equipment and his uniform on. He was behind the camera for more than half of all Super Bowls ever played. Ted tells Logan about some of the biggest moments he captured on the NFL's biggest stage.
All eyes will be on the Super Bowl this Sunday.
That was 18.
This is 23, and
Though very few have experienced the big game in the way Ted Manahan has. The Louisville native retired 2 years ago after 60 years behind the camera.
When they handed me that camera and I started shooting film, it was done. That became my dream.
That dream turned into more than half a century at NFL Films, where he shot 36 Super Bowls, but not what you see during the game. Ted was part of the team bringing fans the up-close and personal moments off the field.
We're myth makers. We're trying to tell a story by showing the character of the game.
And as they do, myths turn to legends, like the last time the Patriots and Seahawks met in the Super Bowl. The NFL sharing this moment on X when Ted and his team caught a moment still mesmerized to this day.
And I remember we had a wireless mic on Tom Brady. And all of a sudden they intercepted that pass, and Brady was screaming like a little girl.
Ted was also there when his friend and Kentucky native Phil Simms coined the iconic phrase we hear after the big game.
I'm gonna go to Disneyland, yeah!
He says finding success has a simple playbook with a blend of skill and sticking with it.
Anything is possible. I'm a great example of that. It's just you have to put yourself in position by working hard at it.
And even though he's put the camera down, an eye like his never really takes a seat on the bench.
I'll critique every shot.
In this case, Ted knows exactly what to look for and how things in his mind, could flow over the course of such a massive production like the Super Bowl. Now, if you care to, play that game as you're watching the action on Sunday, you might see NFL film staff working, running up and down, getting the shots that they need. Ted says just make sure to look for those guys and gals who are marked in blue vests, and they'll be the ones delivering that pretty cool documentary-like product in those frames you're going to see. So we're talking football there. And while, again, teeing up for the Olympics, we just don't, we're going to try to find those connections all over the place and find if, they have any sort of link to here at home for Kentucky and Southern Indiana. But we can also talk about a local product that is representing the community quite proudly. You will see, for example, a thing called ski scooties on the feet of some of the world's top skiers. And, you might ask yourself, what's a scooty? We'll show you the video and the images for that. So the scooties making their way all the way to Milan, actually from the Highlands right here in Louisville. So what we mean is that they are made at Valley Vista Ski Products. They're based here in town, a family company that makes products to help the world's top skiers. They're the Lawlers, and they've been running this out of their home. So the scooties are essentially boot covers, protecting the athlete's shoes from wear and tear. And they're also curved, which makes walking easier when you have them on. We caught up with the Lawlers and learned a little bit more about how they got this idea out of their heads onto the feet of the skiing elite.
So what we did was, since we are a very small company, we didn't have much of an advertising budget. So what we do is that we would go and get the ski scooties to the skiers early in the season.
It seems like that gamble there is paid off. The Lawlers family business, by the way, it sells directly to consumers in this case, meaning the skiers. So trying to get to their target audience. So it's not just Olympic athletes that use their products. It's, skiers of all levels and ages and abilities. And you could see a little bit of, made in the U.S. And now are more familiar with what they look like. So that's the kind of exercise you can expect. We don't have necessarily, the kind of alpine skiing you are going to see in the highlights coming up on the Winter Games. But nonetheless, when the weather does get a little more favorable, a little more welcoming, not as dangerous, working outside in the cold, exercising out in the cold, it can help support endurance for your heart, your lungs, your circulatory system. One thing, though, that doctors, medical experts, fitness experts talk about is being careful out there. So we'll begin with just some reminders of tips from UVille Health, for example, is they would want you to make sure you drink plenty of water before you go exercise in the cold. To remember to also keep wearing layers that you can peel off when it's necessary, when you feel like you are getting too warm. What you do want to make sure, though, is to cover your face, your fingers, and your toes. That is what is the first in the queue, let's call it, first in line that would get frostbite. So you want to protect those as much as possible. Most of all, to know where your surroundings are, because you have to be aware of any icy surfaces that create the risks that would limit you and prevent you.
The other thing that's really
getting
important for our athletes and general population is when they're running, to make sure that they're using smart routes, like looking out for, roads that are paved and not icy, and things like that, trying to make sure that their best way to prevent injury is being smart on the front end, because otherwise you're putting yourself at more risk than it is the benefit of your fitness and activity level.
And that was Dr. Chu, Dr. Justin Chu at U of L Health. So yeah, he's saying working out in the cold helps your endurance. You can burn more calories, strengthen your heart, and naturally, that heart is going to work harder to keep you that warm blood pumping in the cold. I got a little ahead of myself playing Dr. Chu's sound there. But again, it's all about just understanding your surroundings, knowing what's a safe area, a surface to work out on, and what may not be as sturdy or dry, as it were. So as the Winter Olympics go on, much more action that will break down some of these highlights for sure over the course of the coming days and weeks. We also wanted to highlight the local connections, giving us behind-the-scenes looks at what we describe as a mix of things, the mix of power that's required, precision in a lot of sports, if not most, and the passion that the athletes have for what they practice. And that, in turn, you combine that and you get the best of the best competing on the world stage. We want to take you sort of beyond the medals, though, because for as much as there's the glory involved when you compete on an Olympic stage, I want to give you a look at the kind of work, a fraction of the work that it takes to, get really good at these winter sports. We're going to begin this special series we've been working on with my visit to the Derby City Curling Club. Now, you've likely seen this played on TV. You're wondering what are the skills that would help you compete and do well and enjoy this kind of sports. I can tell you firsthand, this is not as easy as you think it is, because there's also the mental aspect of sort of treating this like chess or checkers out on the ice.
You're trying to be precise about where it stops.
Yes, but by sweeping, you can direct it where it goes.
It's the millimeters of the game.
Oh, yes, yeah. When they talk about missing by like a fraction of a quarter, that's the thing that does it.
Do this. I want you to aim here.
Yeah, and that was our instructor, longtime veteran curler, Andrew McKay, which, by the way, with those rocks, which is the things that you launch, you can hit the other team's rocks to try to create that best position. So McKay, the members of the club say this is a great sport, by the way, for any age. Of course, the elements of the sport can make it so that you still have to be really darn good to get to the Olympic stage for a specific role. Who your partners are, how much experience you can handle with the endurance of the cold out on the ice. But club members talking to me that day say there are modifications you could still make. You can play no matter your skill or your age or your ability level, in fact.
It is inclusive in a lot of ways. We have the technology nowadays where if you have trouble moving, or bad knees or bad hips or something, there are tools that we have available to us where you can still curl. It's meant to be inclusive to just about anybody. And that's another nice thing to be part of.
So again, thanks to Andrew. You're going to hear more from him tonight, as well as Derby City Curling Club President Joe Sorg, and the things they're doing over the course of the winter that's still left for us at the Derby City Curling Club, and the things that they kind of open up these sessions where you can come learn and go through lessons with them for sure. We were learning a lot more about the other things curling involves across generations. It's a very social game. It's about the communication, the good laughs and the good memories you'll have out on the ice, the time they spend afterwards sort of decompressing and just spending time together. So we're going to have a much closer look. Hope you join us tonight on Wave News at 11. We're going to have some time over the course of the Winter Games to take a look at some of the other winter sports being practiced and championed and shared with others here in Wave Country. All right, folks, we're going to be back after this break with more Wave News Extra. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, folks, we are back here in the Wave Now studio, coming to you live for tonight's Wave News Wave News Extra live stream. I always appreciate your time as we kind of unpack and debrief on the stories we're following, and we're gonna, round things out with more of these stories, and a lot of that because we know it's also a very active legislative session for bills and debating these ideas in Frankfurt that we're going to discuss sort of the direct and potential impacts that would involve. So if you hadn't been following, we want to break down for you, for example, one bill being offered up at a Kentucky state level that would address affordable housing, and that is gaining some traction in Frankfurt. The House bill you're going to hear probably mentioned, referred to, is called HB 333. It has passed the state house. The measure would remove regulatory barriers for faith-based groups and organizations that would want to develop things like housing, warming centers, shelters. It's a small-scale developments that they say this would be limited to around 24 housing units. It would only be for properties owned by religious institutions, though, prior to January of this year. And so putting some limitations on that, but here is a little bit more from the lawmakers on the things that they want to narrow in on when it comes to the housing that would be applied to in this bill.
The bill requires after housing developed under these authority remain affordable for a minimum of 15 years. Affordability is defined with using established federal HUD standards and enforced through a recorded deed restriction.
The shelters would still need to comply with fire codes and safety requirements, and then they'd still have to be reviewed, but they would have that at their discretion. House Bill 333 is heading to the Senate for further review. There's another bill being discussed in Frankfurt as lawmakers could vote on a bill that would increase restrictions for drivers who have DUI offenses. This is House Bill 563. The long and short of it is it would prevent people with multiple DUI offenses from even buying alcohol. It's legislation modeled after a law that exists in Utah. It could lead to what's called a red tag on a person's driver's license. That red tag would mean the driver has been convicted of a fourth DUI offense, which is a felony already in Kentucky, and then for 2 years, the person would not be allowed to buy alcohol at a commercial or retail level with that ID that they would have to produce. Lawmakers who are supporting this bill say that repeat offenders do pose a serious safety risk to not just themselves, but to others.
With the fourth offense, most people would think at that point in time, somebody's, obviously got an issue, and let's try to implement something that decreases the amount of serious injury and death on our roadways. And I think this is something that can be implemented to do that.
The bill was introduced this past week, has not been assigned to a committee just yet, but the bill supporters believe it can get bipartisan support. All right, here we are zeroing in back to Jefferson County, closer to where we are based, of course, at Wave News, but it's an interesting consideration just to watch out for your dollars, because we are talking about tax refund season also. That is the time of year. So the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office just want to warn folks that there's a new rental property scam going around. The officers and deputies say in some cases they've been getting calls about and filing reports that suspects are apparently advertising homes that they don't own, they don't manage, they can't rent them out, but they're collecting rent payments often in cash and then disappear. The sheriff's office says they're typically targeting victims and families who are dealing with poor credit, or they have housing barriers or barriers to affordable housing, the kind of space that they might need. The sheriff's office, in this case, JCSO, says several victims have actually already come forward to share their report and the story of what happened. If you think you've been the victim of a rental scam or actively being taken advantage of right now, or note that there's suspicious rental activity, something going on, they're asking you to call them, report it to a law enforcement agency as soon as you can. We're going to end things tonight, as we've been doing here on Wave News Extra, with sort of a reflection with our stories to talk about Black History Month. And only a few decades have passed since Louisville specifically desegregated schools. What did it take to make that happen for those who were not there to live through that history? Wave News reporter Marissa Burke, along with Wave meteorologist Juana Andrew, take us back in this segment of 60 Seconds of Black History.
This is 60 Seconds of Black History.
Welcome to 60 Seconds of Black History. It's been 50 years since Louisville desegregated its schools.
For some kids, that first ride was more than a social experiment or new experience, but it was a ride to better education. In 1956, Louisville desegregated its city schools, although not by significant numbers. The county never did.
And Judge James F. Gordon was appointed by Federal Appeals Court to desegregate all Louisville and Jefferson County schools, the city, and the county. The first day of busing was September 4th, 1975.
On that day, no one really knew what to expect, from the kids to the protesters, neighborhood associations, even the teachers. In 2007, the United States Supreme Court ruled in the case of Meredith versus the Jefferson County Board of Education that court-ordered busing was unconstitutional as it relied on racial quotas to assign students to schools. Now, JCPS uses a choice system that allows students to apply to several schools.
And our thanks to Marissa and Tawana for getting these stories and putting together these reflections on very recent history for sure. A reminder that if you notice here, the big thumbnail with the image, folks, this is an example of our digital team in the newsroom updating these stories in real time when this is updates to breaking news. So you're seeing that coming in investigation out of the shooting of a Jeffersonville lounge. So there it is at your fingertips to get the most updated information at the ready at your fingertips here on the wave3.com homepage, where you could also, of course, stream us on Wave Now and the Wave News Extra live stream, all there at your disposal. Letting you know that we'll probably be doing also some more streams or more check-ins with you all as we'll go through this Winter Olympics season, some of the content of the highlights and the interviews and the context around what's going on in Milan-Cortina. So something we'll sort of look forward to sharing with you all, and also to supplement what we always do here in the Wave Now Extra, the Wave News Extra plan, to break down the day's big stories of what's going on here in our backyard and that impacts us, even from a further distance away, but still has some consequence to us in our day-to-day lives. Always appreciate your time, by the way, whether that's on the Wave Now app that you have on your smart TV devices, on the live stream, on the website as well. We're going to be popping out, signing off to go take care of our Wave News at 11. So hope you join us for the premiere of Beyond the Medals as well. All right, folks, I'm Jose Sosaya. We'll see you next week as we start the week after the Super Bowl. Enjoy. Be safe and be warm out there. We'll see you soon.